Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Healing the Patriarchy with Love podcast. I'm Luna and I'm your host tonight. And I'm really excited and honoured to be able to introduce you to Christina Tsirkas. Christina is a writer, a poet, and wild horses advocate focused on inspiring and uplifting women. And I certainly find her very inspiring and uplifting to be around, and I hope that you do too. Christina, hello, and a really big warm welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hi, Luna. Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be speaking with you. And I happen to find you very uplifting and inspiring as well.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely to know. Thank you so much. So we're definitely in for an inspiring and uplifting episode then. That's good to know. Great. So just for the listeners, I kind of met Christina because I have a copy of her poetry book called Femme Feral, which I absolutely love. And it's so beautiful. It's just so beautifully presented, beautifully written. And it's really deep, but because it's done in such a soft, feminine way, but with a very clear message, it's really quite a healing poetry book. I found it healing anyway. And Christina, I don't think I've told you this yet, but just for the listeners really as well, I felt like when I read it, I went on a journey with you into your own self-love.
Oh, wow. No, you did not tell me that. That's so interesting to hear.
Yeah, that's kind of what happened for me when the first time that I read it. Anyway, I've read it more than once. And I really loved that. And I felt like it was such a gift to anybody that read it, because it kind of had, reflections in it for my own kind of journey with that. And also I could recognize in it, other women that I know that had similar journeys and things like that. So I think it's just such a gift, this book that you've written. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that. Do you want to tell us a bit about what inspired you to write the book? What kind of prompted you to? I know you write a little bit at the start about, you kind of set the tone at the start of the book, but for the listeners that haven't got the book yet, do you want to kind of tell them what happened, what made you want to write that book?
Yes, of course. And thank you for sharing that. It's always so wonderful, to hear from other women how the book has impacted them. And it just makes me even more grateful that all of those words came through me and I was able to put this book out there. Because I have to tell you, Femme Feral was not planned. I mean, I've always loved writing, and my focus was more towards fiction. And I didn't have, a poetry book in the lineup, but I had been going through a lot. And one of the things that was bothering me at the time was that I was in a relationship with an individual much older than me. And I was being judged by mostly other women, I have to say, and labeled as a gold digger. And it was something that was just so far from who I am as a person. But at the same time, it's very hard not to take something like that so personally, to where it negatively impacts how you feel about yourself. And I realized that it's not good to hold any of those feelings inside. And so one day I sat down and I just started writing a poem. And the poem is called Gold Digger. And it's the first one I wrote for the book. And I felt so much better after I got it out of my system, because I took such a horrible label and I turned it around and actually made it a positive. And so for me, it felt like the process of doing that was taking back my power. And so after I wrote that, all these other poems just started flowing out of me. And once I had so many of them, I felt compelled to put them into a book. And there's a few illustrations in the book as well. And those were actually done by a dear friend, an artist of mine named Julia Charles. And so it all just came together in this magical way. And here it is out in the world.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. And I'm so sorry that, other women were calling you a gold digger. I hardly know you at all, but I can tell that is so far, as you said, from who you are as a person. I really sense that. I know that myself. I can feel that. Quite shocking, really, when other women turn on women, isn't it?
I mean, I'm not sure if I would say it's shocking. I think it's saddening, but at the same time, I've learned that people can only meet you where they are. And we never know what other people are going through. So if they're coming from a place like a lot of the women who I think put this label on me were older women. And so I think if you're looking at a younger woman from the vantage point of competition or insecurity, then you're more likely to go in that direction, because these were people who didn't actually know me, who hadn't had so much as a full conversation with me. So, you know, it's just a matter of, hey, where is this person at in their own experience? And, I hope they get past that, but I'm not going to let their words negatively impact my experience anymore.
Yeah, I like that. That is so empowering. And I agree that people can only meet you where they're at. And I know often we think it can be a reflection of us, a part of us that's unhealed, but I actually am a great believer in people are just reflecting where they are on their own life path and how much they've yet to heal. And usually it's just actually a show of their pain, isn't it?
Exactly. And so at the end of the day, it's better to have compassion for them, because they're the ones going through more pain than they're actually inflicting on you, even though it can be hard to see it that way in the moment. But I think that's part of the reason why really processing these emotions, especially through something as therapeutic as writing, can give you the clarity to get to that point.
Yeah, I think that's why the book is so healing as well, because it is so authentic. I can tell that you were kind of healing as you were writing it, and that's why it was quite healing for me to read it, because I guess it's kind of got that kind of energy, if you like, almost like a transmission in it of the healing that you went through. And that can be kind of like almost like catching, can't it, for people? So that's why I found it so healing, I think, because I was like, oh yeah, I know what that feels like. I really know, I understand that. I can totally empathize with that. Um,
That's
so
funny you say that, because I did a reading a few weeks ago, and some of the women in the audience, they came up to me afterwards and they were saying the exact same thing. They were like, reading your book makes me realize that I'm not alone, because I felt this way too, and this way and that way. And it's so good to know that someone else feels those same things.
yeah, that's it. It's like you've kind of given, what would normally be a hidden aspect of the feminine. You've brought it out into the light and given it a voice, but in this really beautiful, artistic, creative way.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you said that you were going to be writing fiction. So are you going to be writing fiction as well? I know you're a writer as well as a poet. So do you have other books?
So I have a fiction trilogy that I'm currently working on. And my goal would be to have the first book out probably either towards the end of this year or the beginning of next year. But I actually have another poetry book coming out in June. So it's going to be sort of the next in series for my Femme Feral series, and it's called Femme Metamorphosis. And I realized in writing the first book that I started unpacking my baggage. And of course, once you start doing that, you're always going to find more. And so it's turned into another series of poems and quotations. And this time, I'm also including some personal essays in the book as well.
Oh, well, I'm excited for that. That sounds
Yes,
really good.
thank you. So that's going to be out on June 21st.
Great. Oh, the summer solstice. Wonderful.
Yes.
A great time to launch. Very fitting, I'm sure. And I love the name Metamorphosis as well.
Exactly. Spring is the season of rebirth. And so this is a whole rebirthing process that will culminate on the summer solstice.
Yeah, that's perfect. It is a peak, isn't it? The summer solstice, a peak of energy, really.
Yes, it really is.
Yeah, so that's great. The first book, because I just want to let people know, in case you can't tell, I'm English, so my accent and the way I say things is slightly different. So I call it Femme Feral, just because that's how we say it here.
Oh
Um,
no, we say it here. I
yeah.
wanted to call it feral because I love the play on words with femme fatale. So
Oh, I
I
see.
wanted it to have the same ring to it. But if you read it here in this country, it would also be femme feral. And I just didn't think that had the same kind of poetic lift to it as femme feral. So I will always refer to it as feral.
Oh, I got you. I just wanted, because I thought, I wonder if the listeners know, they might be thinking, why is she saying it like that? So, oh, that explains it. Oh, that's a really clever play on words. I like that. When I was reading it, I kind of, this was before I even got to the end where you say this, but it kind of, I could sense like wild horses running. And I even had a vision of them running whilst I was reading the book, and I could kind of feel this, this wild feminine being liberated. I mean, was that some of your intention with the book? Can you talk a bit about, because I think it does have some of the energy of that, and I know you say a bit at the end about that. Can you kind of tell the listener a little bit without giving too much away, of course?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I love horses, and that was something I wanted to incorporate because I see some of not just my experience, but the feminine experience as a whole through horses. So, a few years ago, I went to an animal sanctuary near me, and it was the first time that I encountered wild mustangs. And I know that wild mustangs have been out west, roaming freely since like the 19th century. And there's a lot of sordid history with that, but they've always been a symbol of freedom. And I think there's some sort of feminine energy with horses as well, because I've always been wanting to be around them since I was a child. And I had only seen them in a setting where, they were in a barn and they were being used for lessons or for shows or for racing or whatever it was. And so this experience at the sanctuary was the first time I saw these wild horses, and the owner was intent on giving them as close to an experience as they would have, out west running free as she could. So they were still free horses, in my mind, and they had this magical energy to them. And so after I met them, I started learning more about the wild mustangs and how the number of free roaming horses out west has been reduced by 98% since the 19th century. And I started feeling like, okay, they're rounding the wild horses up, they're putting them into holding pens, and they're essentially taking back that sense of freedom. So they're no longer free. They're in a situation where they can be adopted out. And of course, when they get adopted out, it's to people who are going to use them either for, riding or racing or whatever function they choose. But now they're just no longer free. We're putting these constraints on them. And to me, that was symbolic of sort of the societal restraints that we put on women to limit their freedom. And so for me, it took on this whole symbolism to where I want that free spirit that wild horses have, where you're running free and you don't have these constraints and you can just be who you are. And so that became part of the book for me, and also part of the advocacy that I really want to be involved in, both for women and for wild horses, because I would love to see a world where women feel free, where they don't feel like the patriarchy is putting all of these constraints on them. But I know that we're pretty far away from that, especially given what happened in our country, with abortion rights in the past year.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see the symbolism. It's funny because it's never really occurred to me before. And I don't really know anything about wild horses. I've only really learnt since I met you. And that kind of what do I want to say? I can't find the word. it's like a kinship, isn't it, really, between women and our story, as you say, and their story. Um, yeah, I can see that in it. I definitely can. And yeah, I'm so sorry for what's happened in your country with the removal of abortion rights. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
We can. I mean, that's something that I do address in the book that I have coming out.
Mm, yeah.
It's a
So
difficult topic, I think, you know,
it,
but
yeah,
of course we can talk about it because it's important.
yeah. So I mean, here in the UK, we did hear about it, and there was outrage, and there was an awful lot of posts on social media from UK, Facebook pages and other social media pages in support of sisters um, that have had these rights, wrongly taken, in my view anyway, wrongly taken from them. What was it like that to be there, to be one of the women? What was that like?
It's a surreal experience. Um, and I wasn't in person, in any of the protests that happened, but following it online and just seeing the backlash from women, it was inspiring in a way just to see these women getting so worked up and involved because it is an important right. And I don't think it's something that should be taken away because I don't see how the government should be able to have control over my body and particularly women's bodies. I mean, it has nothing to do with men's bodies. There's no sort of control over theirs because they don't have these set of organs or this function. But I don't see how you can force a woman to have a child, especially in situations where she is a victim of rape. To me, that is raping her all over again. I went to a theater performance and I was waiting in line for the bathroom and there was a woman behind me who started talking to me and she was so worked up over what happened that abortion came up. And the first thing she says to me is, "Oh my God, I hope you're not pro-life." But her biggest shock was that her daughters, who she's raising right now, and I think they were about 18, she's like, "My daughters are going to grow up with fewer rights than I had. How does that make any sense? How are we moving backwards instead of forwards?"
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really powerful point. And I think, um, from my point of view, I think these governments and these sort of people that really hold a strong patriarchal energy and try and, force these systems on us, I feel almost like they're in, when somebody's dying and they're gasping for the last breath and they hold on and they refuse to die and let go, like the last throes of death.
Yes.
I sense it's that. I sense it's just, the last ditch attempt to control the feminine.
I would love
Um,
to think that you're right and we're at that last point, but I'm not sure.
yeah, I
I
don't know
hope
how
it's
long
headed
it
in
will
a better
take.
direction.
Oh, sorry, Christina. I spoke then over you. I didn't mean to.
No,
What did
no,
you
no, it's
say?
fine. No, I was just saying that I really hope that we're headed in a better direction with a more feminine energy and that you're right. And they're trying to hang on for dear life, but I don't know. It's
Hmm.
very hard to tell what's going to happen going forward.
Yeah, it is. And I guess we don't know how, yes, it might all be dying, but we don't know how long it's going to take to die, or what that death will look like. Death can be really messy, let's be honest, especially the ending of something that has had centuries of control. I guess we can't expect it to go without a fight. My sense is that the feminine energy on the planet is increasing, but it just seems to be so subtle. because at the moment people don't value it. So it's increasing, but it's kind of not being seen, even though it's increasing. I mean, I was thinking the other day about this, and I was thinking about, you know, the way it used to be, kind of everything was so logical and tangible. It was, you know, what car somebody had, what job they had, what labels they were wearing. And I do think that that's dying off. I know we do still have celebrity and influencer type culture going on, but I think it feels like that's not the same. I think there's more and more people are being revered for the more feminine qualities of kindness. And I think, you know, even if I kind of go on YouTube and have a look for some videos and things, I think there's so many videos that are about loving kindness, charity, you know, cute things with animals, intuition, spirituality, things like that that are a bit more leaning towards the feminine. So I just think it's very subtle. I think it's infiltrating very subtly. And when these big horrible things like what's happened with the abortion rights happens,
No.
because it's so hard hitting, that the other stuff kind of takes a back seat. You can't see it as much because it's not as it's not painful like the abortion rights thing hurts. It hurts. I mean, obviously we have abortion rights in this country. We're very lucky to have that, but it still hurt me to know that they were taken away from a group of women. And as you quite rightly pointed out, the government has no right to do that. They don't have a right to have a say over a woman's body. And I think they know that.
I'm not sure if they care. That's the difference, you know? Like, you can know something, but whether you actually care or you're acting in the best interest of, you know, the other gender is a whole different story.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know where they're at in terms of, I don't even know if I can use the word morals in the same sentence as them, to be honest, but, but I was kind of like, doesn't sound like the right word when you're talking about them. But yeah, I guess we don't know where they're at, do we? And it's a bit like a bigger version of what we were talking about at the start about, you know, just how much pain must these people be in to be trying to exert control over something that's just got absolutely nothing to do with them. I mean, just
Exactly.
how desperate, you know?
Yeah. But if we're going back to the horses and women,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
think even situations like this, where you're seeing sort of this forced dominance from the patriarchy, it's also symbolic with how horses have been treated for a long time. And dominance was really the way to train. So, especially these old methods where you're breaking a horse, you're essentially breaking their spirit. You're wearing them down to get them to do what you want to do. And you're doing it through fear and intimidation. And I think that's how a lot of, you know, things with women have gone as well, with that same attitude. There's like fear, intimidation, domination, control by men. And it almost seems like this fear of the feminine being free, like you were saying, just like you know, this fear of establishing a relationship of respect with the horse, for example. And, you know, now there are a lot of methods, more natural horsemanship, where that's exactly what you do, is you're speaking to the horse sort of in their own language, and you're developing that relationship of respect. But for so many years, it wasn't like that.
Oh, do you know, because I haven't really been around horses very much. I've got friends that have horses. I've got a friend that's got some horses, and I've been kind of around hers a little bit, only, you know, once or twice kind of been to the field with them. But I've actually never ridden a horse, so I don't know anything about them, and I didn't know that they broke their spirit. I almost want to cry, Christina. Is that, oh God, honestly. I have to take a minute. I'm sorry.
Well, I did
I'm
not want to make you cry.
no, no, no. It's okay. It's very easily done. I cry at everything. Um, oh my God. Well, I'm so grateful that there are new ways coming in, though. And actually, do you know what? I mean, you tell me if this is right, but I would think that the new way actually benefits all parties and probably gets better results.
Exactly. That's what a lot of trainers have said. And even I'm reading this book now by a woman named Linda Kohanov, who in the 90s was one of the first, she was part of a group of women who actually started like equine therapy for women. But she was saying in the book that every time, trying to force the horse to do something didn't work, she just stop and do nothing and be with the horse. And every time she used these more feminine traits of just stillness, compassion, intuition, she got so much further with the horse than when she tried to force the horse to do something.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's a living being with a soul and a heart. Yeah. Do you know what this
Exactly.
is?
And so are women.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And yes, and both creatures and, well, all beings on the planet deserve equality, peace, respect, compassion, kindness as a basic. I think that's an absolute base level, to be honest.
Exactly. And they also deserve a feeling of freedom.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely they do. Do you know, this was reminding me because a while ago I did an inner child meditation for myself. I was having some problems with my inner child and I needed to go and connect, and I knew I really needed to kind of heal them and comfort them and kind of spend some time with them. So I did an inner child meditation, going into my heart space to find my inner child. And one of my cats, Goku, always meditates with me, and he came and he meditated next to me. And towards the end of the meditation, he showed me his heart. And inside his heart was a little tiny kitten version of him. So my inner child was kind of dancing in my heart space. And he also had an inner child in his heart space.
Oh
And
man, that's amazing.
oh, it was so honestly so moving. And in that moment, because we're fairly telepathic, we're quite, we can communicate with each other, me and this cat. And he told me that all animals have, a little mini version of themselves, like, dogs have puppies in their like an inner child, basically, the animal version of that. So when you think about that, horses have got little ponies in their heart spaces that need love and care and compassion the same way our inner children do.
Exactly. They're all sentient beings, and we
Yeah,
should treat them as such.
yeah, we should definitely. So what happens? I know you're a wild horse advocate, so are you working with an actual charity to help them?
Well, I'm not partnered with, or I'm not directly working with one, but I know of one that I support, and I have met the founder of the organization, and she does excellent work. And hopefully later this year, I'll be going out to visit the facility. And this organization is called Return to Freedom. It's located in California, and they are a wild horse and burro sanctuary. And I think they have about close to 500 wild horses, and they all roam free. Like they have designated land, and then the horses are able to live on that land as they were in the wild, or at least as close as possible as it can get to the wild. So these horses, they're not used for riding or anything. And the organization is also an advocacy and education center. So they're advocating for the rights of these animals, and they're also educating people on the history of what's happened with the wild horses, and also, about where they come from and why we need to have them around. And they're an important part of history.
Yeah, I love I love that name. That's very in alignment with your book and your message and your mission, isn't it?
It is, and I have to say, I love the name too. When I first found it, I was like, oh my God, that's calling me. For some reason, just this idea of returning to freedom, you know? I picture just like running through a field with my arms wide open, the way a horse would gallop through a field. And it's not necessarily the act of doing it, it's just the feeling of being free. And you don't necessarily get that in this kind of patriarchal society where there's been so many standards forced upon women for so long, or these societal expectations that have altered, I think they've altered all of our behavior, whether consciously or subconsciously.
Yeah, I think they have. Yeah. And one of the things that I quite often share on my YouTube videos, or sometimes on this podcast, or sometimes I write about it on my Facebook page, is this and I think it's subconscious with the majority of people. I certainly don't think it's intentional, but we tend to value anything. I'm really sorry if you can hear one of my cats. He's shouting in the background, talking about animals being free. Um, he's obviously got strong opinions. He's
Yeah,
shouting
he's
in the
got
background.
something.
Yeah, he doesn't like the patriarchy either. um, I think, anything that's got kind of, I call it yang rather than kind of the masculine as such, because it's more about essence and energy for me, or principles or qualities that are, masculine in the energy. I think they get valued more than anything that's feminine in quality, that's yin, and I think, I mean, patriarchy is much more complex than that, and I know that, but just when I try and simplify it and make it more accessible to people, that's what I share, because I just feel like if we can just start to notice that, it changes everything.
Exactly. It's when it's off, when it's out of balance, that's when
Yeah.
there's an issue, because it's important to have both this masculine and feminine energy, but they need to complement each other. And I think a lot of the time with the patriarchy, it's just, as you said, it's been out of balance to where these masculine traits are considered more desirable or more valuable than the feminine ones.
Yeah, and of course each has equal value, and when they're balanced, it creates a much kinder, healthier relationship with ourselves and with others and for the entire planet.
Exactly. I think they were always meant to be balanced. It's just finding a way to get back to that point. Or I don't know if we're going back to that point. I should say just to get to that point in general.
Yeah, I don't know if we've ever been at that point. It's hard to know, isn't it? Maybe in some other realm, but not
Maybe,
this one.
maybe if we went back to some of the ancient cultures, that were like
Yeah,
maybe the ancient Egyptians, for example.
yeah,
Not
Egypt was
knowing too
just,
much about it in the specifics, but at least they had female gods and women on the throne. So I would say there's more chance that that was a more balanced society than we have now.
yeah. And of course, we don't want to create a matriarchy, because that's out of balance as well. So it's tricky stuff, isn't it, really?
Yes.
But I feel part of that is definitely how we treat animals. And if we're not kind to animals, I think it speaks volumes about us as a race.
Oh, I definitely agree with that. And I, for one, I mean, as much as I love wild horses, I am an animal advocate in general, because I think animals are such an important part of the planet and of the human experience as well, because they have so much to teach us. And a lot of the time, we look at them as some type of commodity whether we're using them for food or for dairy products or for jackets. I just, to ride, they always have to have a purpose that serves our needs.
Yeah, that's true, isn't it? We're always looking for almost what we can take from them instead of living in harmony with them. And I think there's definitely ways that we can still have things from them if we need them, but we can certainly do it in a much more caring way. I think in particular farming, I think because of, certainly in the UK, I obviously don't know what it's like anywhere else, but in the UK, the big supermarkets that we have here don't really pay farmers properly. So what happens is farms, of course, are run on a very, they kind of run, as cheaply as they can be, which kind of course, then changes their decisions about, how to treat animals. And then there's also within the supermarkets, there's so much choice and so much waste. Most of it goes to waste. And you think, that is actually an animal's life that's gone to waste in the case of meat or dairy. Whereas, if we just had more local food available to us, because the UK is only small, so everywhere you go there's a farm that's kind of local to you. If we kind of just got things direct from there, we would know what was happening to the animals and we would know how they were being treated. And I think I'm all for choice. I'm actually vegetarian myself, but I'm all for choice, you see. So I think that to me, if we knew how they were being treated and we knew that they were at least being cared for and looked after, and it was all done in a very compassionate and thoughtful manner, then I can live with that. But at the moment, the way things are, I don't like it. There's too much competition for pricing and things, and people want to go into a supermarket and be able to choose from millions of different types. And I think that kind of has just spoiled people, and they've forgotten about the process that happens in order for them to have that.
I think people today don't think about it because it's become completely normalized to where you go to the supermarket, or even when you go to a restaurant, there's all these different options on the menu and you order whatever you feel like. And so they're always stocked with chicken, with beef, and nobody is thinking about the animal's life because you're seeing it on your plate for the first time. So I don't think you have that association. I think if you actually walked, like a little animal up to a table at a restaurant and said to someone, okay, so you want this one tonight, they might rethink their choice. But in this country, we have a lot of factory farming, and factory farming is awful. And they've documented a lot of abuse towards the animals, like just having, like, for example, having so many chickens in one cage to where they can't move and they're all standing in each other's feces, and having pigs who never leave a cage for their entire life, even though we've established that pigs are as intelligent as 5-year-old children. But then factory farming, you take them and you stick them in this cage and they just spend their entire life there fattening up or giving birth. And that's bacon. And everybody loves bacon, right? But nobody's thinking about where are we getting that bacon from? And, from an energy perspective, I don't see how the food you're ingesting could be healthy when it comes from those conditions, because imagine the energy involved in those conditions or with the animal stuck in that position.
Yeah, that sounds similar to not all farms here, but there are some like that. And the labelling's getting a little bit better on things. So, for example, eggs here, you can get them where they've come from the circumstances that you've talked about, and that's just kind of your plain everyday eggs. Or you can get free range, which means they're like that at night, but they're allowed out in the day. Or you can get organic where they're just allowed to roam. So for example, I always buy organic. That's just my personal choice. But like you say, there's an energy, isn't there, to what's happened to the animal. And certainly I think if you're empathic or sensitive in any way, you can potentially even taste that. Sometimes if I go to a restaurant and I can tell the chef was having a bad day, not because the food's bad, but I could sense in the vibration of the food.
Exactly. How were you feeling when you cooked this today, Sarah? It doesn't feel like you were in a great place.
Yeah, feels like you want to be at home with your feet up. Yeah, or sometimes, because sometimes people have to come into work as a chef or anything else, grieving or whatever. And sometimes I can sense that, like I actually know, I can tell. So yes, it's the same with an animal, isn't it? There must be some of that energy still in the meat, in the product, I would think. And I think we have to move to a kind of world that, is taking all life as sacred and honoring it and doing right by it.
I agree. And I would say, there's a lot more people who are trying out the vegan diet at this point. And I know that I am somewhere between vegan and vegetarian. I've cut out dairy and all land animals from my diet. And also, we have a lot of sanctuaries now, which is great to see. And I've visited a few down here that protect farm animals. And, I think the more exposure people have to these kinds of sanctuaries, the more likely things are to change, to where even if someone doesn't want to, become vegan or become vegetarian, at least maybe they'll consider the ethical standards involved in where the animals are coming from and how they're treated before they get on your plate.
Yeah, because it's still a life, it's still a being, it still counts, it still matters.
Exactly. It's like back when the American Indians in this country, when they killed a buffalo for meat, they used the whole animal. I mean, they used the fur for blankets or for shelter. They treated the death of the buffalo with the utmost respect. So it was almost like a spiritual process, right? Yeah. It wasn't just like, oh, we need this, and you slit its throat and that's it. It's like no consideration for the animal whatsoever. And so I think we need to switch towards having more reverence for these beings that make our lives on this planet better.
That's it, they do, don't they? And I'm just wondering, when you were talking then, it feels like almost like gratitude is what's missing a little bit from this whole process, gratitude for what animals do give to us, because we all make up the entire ecosystem together, a bit like the food chain, if you like, or however you want to think of it. It's a whole world of an ecosystem that we make up together. And I think it pays to be grateful to every part of that, whether it's a tree, a plant, a rock, the sea, or a horse, or a farm animal, or whatever,
I think before you could get to the gratitude, you have to be able to recognize the animal as a sentient being. And I think a lot of people aren't quite there yet.
Yeah, I think maybe you're right. Maybe that's what it is. And that makes me sad. Sad for them and sad for the animals.
Well, it makes me sad too. But I've seen it. I mean, I was down in the Florida Keys a couple of weeks ago, and there's a station where you can feed the tarpon, which are these really giant fish that everybody likes to kind of feed little fish. And there's a bunch of pelicans that hang out on the dock. And you have to be careful because when you're feeding the tarpon, the pelicans typically want to come up to you and they're not shy and they want the fish. And you can't blame them. That's their instinct. They're hungry. They want to eat. You're holding a fish. But this one guy, they tell you to shoo the pelicans away. So if you kind of just walk towards them, they'll leave you alone. But this one guy, man, he just runs at the pelicans and he's like, get off my dock. And I'm like looking at him. I'm like, what do you mean get off your dock? A, it's not your dock. B, what kind of attitude is that? It was such an aggressive move, like unnecessarily aggressive. And it was that kind of show of dominance that we're talking about. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, well, he is definitely not looking at that pelican as another sentient being deserving of respect and consideration.
Gosh, no. I would not want to see that. That would have upset me, I think. And yeah, it's that, yes, it's kind of like that.
Well, this is the same guy who I saw tell his kid, oh yeah, just throw your shoe at them. And I'm like, what are you teaching a child that for? We don't want that taught to a child. You don't want her to grow up thinking she can throw shoes at birds all the time.
Oh no, I mean, yeah, when there's no hope, is there actually? If people are teaching their children to be like that, goodness me.
Well, it's
That
the
is
kind of
awful.
situation where you look and it makes you think, if people learn this from a young age, they don't think twice about it because the behavior is just normal to them. And you can't blame them if they're brought up that way. And that's why one of the things that I think is important is exposing children to all of these animals from a young age so that they can develop, a relationship and empathy and some sort of connection with them.
Yeah, I think developing empathy is a really big one. And I think our children now, I think a lot of them are being born and they're so enlightened already. But if they're born into situations like that with parents like that, what happens to them? They don't really stand a chance, do they, if they're being taught to throw shoes at living beings?
I think it depends on the child. I mean, there are a lot of enlightened people who grew up in circumstances worse than that. So it's just what you choose to do with your life while you're here and how much personal development you're willing to take on.
Yeah, it's kind of the bravery in your choices, isn't it, to follow the path of your highest potential.
That's definitely a big part of it.
Yeah, I really hope that children can all be encouraged like that. I really want children to, have proper educations now that come out of these really harsh education systems. And I really long for them to have, like you say, to, be around animals and to be immersed in life, but with, teacher guardians kind of thing. I just think it's the future, really, to let children almost kind of lead the way through their natural instinct to learn and be. I mean, they teach us a lot, don't they? Just like you were saying, animals do. Children can teach us so much.
Exactly, because what do they have in common with animals? They have this ability to stay in the present, which is something that we struggle with in adulthood, as you get away from being able to just stay in the present moment.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I've struggled with. I'm getting better. I'm getting much better, actually. I'd say this year I've made quite big strides with that, but it has always been something that I've struggled with, to stay in the present moment. I think there's so many distractions for humans these days, isn't there? And everything's about convenience. And, if you go online, it's not even a post anymore. There's like a little reel that's a 1-minute video, or everything's there's so much data available, but so quickly and at no cost to the person that's receiving it. And I think we've just gone too far with a convenience culture that, there's always a flashing light of an advert or somebody wanting your attention, whether it's online or whether you go outside. And
There's a lot of distractions for sure that are hard to tune out or turn off. And I'm like you, I'm making strides towards remaining in the present moment, but just something as simple as having your phone next to you can be a hindrance to that process, because it's just going to go off with some sort of notification and it draws your attention to the phone. So I've been trying to leave it in a different room sometimes just to get a break.
yeah, that's actually something that I do as well. I go, it's not coming with me. And I keep it face down a lot of the time as well. Because like you say, there's a notification about flipping everything, isn't there? Like, I try to turn off notifications, but even with many turned off, there's always some notification. If it's not an email, it's a text or a voice recording, or, a missed phone call or a voicemail, or something happening on social media, or whatever, or your diary is flashing up. Don't forget, you've got a meeting in 30 minutes or whatever it is. It's so hard, isn't it?
It is. It is. But it is really great when you can get to that point where you shut it off for a little while.
Yeah, it is. It's an achievement, I think, in the way life is at the moment. I think it's a real achievement. The more of us, even if we just spend, a few moments a day in stillness and in quiet and almost kind of meditation, without it necessarily meaning that you close your eyes and breathe and all that. I think the more we can do that, the more of us, it will start to catch on and become a more natural state of being for everybody.
Exactly. That's the hope for sure.
Yeah. So I think we've got about 10 minutes left. So I just want to check whether there's anything that you want to say that you haven't said. And then I'm going to ask you if you would be willing to read out one of your poems.
Of course, I would love to.
Thank you. So do you have anything you want to say before you read a poem, or do you just want to read one of your poems?
Well, I think we've covered a lot of interesting topics today. And I think going back to the book, the book is not as heavy as some of the topics that we've discussed today. And so for anyone who's actually interested in reading the book, I think you'll find there's a lot in it. And a lot of it has to do with the societal expectations that we've talked about on how women should act, or how women should think, or how they should be, whether that is from, not getting quote unquote crazy during your menstrual cycle, which we are constantly written off as crazy, and that drives me crazy. But also just like this, this need for perfection, or this need to always be doing something, or to take care of everyone else before you take care of yourself. I mean, my poems go through all of that. So for anyone that resonates with, please definitely read the book, reach out. I always love to hear from readers.
Yeah, and I can vouch that it is light. It's definitely light. There's a lightness through it, even though it's very authentic and talking about what can be seen as a difficult topic. It's been done in such a beautiful feminine way that there definitely is a lightness through it.
Thank you.
It's okay. So do you want to read one of the poems, and then everybody can have a little taster anyway, and they will get to hear?
Yes, I would love to. And I think given that we've been talking so much about horses and other animals, the poem that I would like to read is called Wild Spirit. And it's the poem that I specifically wrote with the Mustangs and women in mind.
Oh, yes, I love this.
Running free across the terrain, galloping over rock and plain, manes blowing in the breeze, no human captors to appease, strong and enduring, Wild mustangs are alluring. Bands of families living together, capable of surviving any weather. I watch with awe and wonder, herds pounding past like thunder, living without restrictions, holding fast to their own convictions. Fully in touch with who they are, I appreciate their spirit from afar. The same spirit I see in me, wild and free.
Thank you so much. I love that. I absolutely love it. And thank you so much for coming on the show. So do you want to just kind of let people know where they can get the book, where they can find you, that kind of thing?
Of course. And thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to be here as well.
Yeah, I've loved talking with you. I'm so sorry, my cat is meowing in the background. I'm hoping that the noise cancellation software might be cutting him out.
I can't actually hear it.
Yeah, so I think the software will be cutting him out, but I'm just hoping it's not cut out any of our talk at the same time.
Okay.
This is his play time, so he's upset, he's shouting. So I'm so sorry.
No, of course. So before we go play with him, if you're interested in reading Femme Feral, it's available in both ebook and paperback on Amazon. And you can get it on any Amazon, whether it's the .com, whether it's the UK one or the Australian one, anywhere you are, it's available on all the different platforms. And if you want more information about me or any of my upcoming releases or what I'm working on, you can go to ChristinaTsirkas.com. And since I'm not expecting you to know how to spell that, there's definitely going to be a link to my website below this podcast. And thank you so much. I hope anyone out there listening decides to read some of my work.
Oh, I hope so too. And yes, I will put the links in the show notes so that you'll be able to just go direct if you're wanting to buy the books. And I'm not affiliated, by the way, I don't get any money or anything, but there will be a link. Just make that clear to everyone. I will definitely put links up to Christina's website and to the books so that you can just click on those easily if you want to. So Christina, thank you so much. And thank you so much to all our listeners. And I will be back again sometime soon with another episode for you all. Take care now. Thank you and bye.